So some interesting stuff yesterday. We're going to look at two different contrasting power files today, and some different thoughts about those. Very fortunate, to have Luke's file, who's second place, and unfortunately Tim wasn't feeling so great yesterday, and has been running a little fever for the past couple days. So I mean, the fact that he even raced yesterday was amazing. Soldiered on all the way through it. But then to kind of look at his power file and see what happens when you're not feeling up to snuff, and how that goes as well. So let's look at Tim's first, and then we'll kind of go over to Luke's and talk a little bit about how this went, and then we'll look into the actual individual files themselves as well. So here's a ride that Tim did, and again, for not feeling good, 5 hours for 112 miles. Very, very impressive. A lot of people would kill to do that. So that's really impressive. His average normalized power is 257 watts. So normalized power, if you're not familiar with that, that's an algorithm that Dr. Coggin and I came up with in order to take into account the variability of power fluctuations, because we're up and down all the time. So this is really what his body felt, like what we call the metabolic cost. So his average power takes into account the time he's not pedaling, the time he's pedaling very lightly, and the time he's pedaling very hard. So that power is going to be lower. So his normalized power, what his body felt, 257. Had he ridden at a steady pace, like on a CompuTrainer or something, for that 5 hours, that's what he would have averaged, 257. So average 235. Kilojoules, 4,285. So kilojoules is a measurement of work, and we can convert that into kilocalories. It's about a 1-to-1 ratio, but we add about 10% for a little fudge factor. So figure, yesterday, Tim, you burned about 4,500 calories. Okay, so that's a lot of food. Hopefully you ate last night.
What's the last drink?
And a few drinks too.
Yeah. So that's a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of calories just in the bike leg, and that's something then to consider. Oh wow, now you got to also go and do a marathon after that. You got to eat a lot of food just on the bike to be prepared for that. Training stress score, he scored 307 points in his training stress score, and that's a measurement that also Dr. Coggin and I came up with to give every ride a score. So it's based on 1 hour, what we call your threshold power. If you go as hard as you can for an hour, you get 100 points. So based on this, he got the same amount of training stress had he ridden as hard as he could for 3 hours straight, and separated them 1 hour at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 hour at a time. So a lot of training stress. So just from that, you got a lot of training stress. This is going to be, when we kind of categorize training stress score, anything over 300 points takes about a week to recover from, so you can repeat that effort again. Doesn't mean that at the end of the week he's not going to be sore anymore, but to actually go back and do that same kind of effort, it's going to be about a week for that. Variability Index, I'll show you a little bit about that when we look in the file. Variability Index is really what we look at from the fact of how his normalized power was and his average power is. And so when you have a large variability index, it means that you're pedaling not so steadily, much with a lot more bursts, a lot more efforts. In an Ironman type event, what we try and do is we try and make sure that we hold a little less than 1.1. So a little variable, and I think that was probably because just the way back you were just kind of cruising and weren't really being super smooth on the power on the way back. So we'll look at Luke's. His was a little less variable on the way back. Average speed 22 miles an hour, average cadence 83 RPM. So this is what Tim's file looks like right here, and the yellow is the power, green is cadence, blue is speed, and this orange is the elevation. Okay, so it's very obvious. You can see the elevation change here, the climb up to Hawaii, and then back down again, and then the way home. So Tim started out pretty darn strong here, and was in this first two hours was averaging about 320 watts or so, and then right around here towards the Hawaii climb, I think we start to really feel, you know, the last couple of days not feeling so good. And from there, you know, he was just really hanging on at that point all the way to the finish. And you can see his power even dropping down here below 200 watts towards the end. So tell us a little bit, Tim, about kind of your perspective on how the bike went.
Yeah, I definitely didn't feel great. Coming out of the water, my whole body was kind of just achy and crampy. And for me, as a swimmer, you know, I usually feel pretty comfortable coming out of the water. And, you know, just right going up Kalani, I could tell, you know, something wasn't right. Still world champ, so I was, you know, trying to hold on as much as I could, and was doing a lot of yo-yoing on the back of the group. And yeah, Ferris came by me and got back up to the group, and then got gapped again, kind of just trying to hold on and come back. And eventually, I couldn't come back anymore, and I hit, you know, the climb going up the Javi, and you can see my watch dropping as I'm climbing, which, you know, usually when you're going uphill, your watts are going up. So that's probably at about the point Julie Divins passed me, somewhere around there. So yeah, I mean, basically the ride home was just kind of getting back, and I knew it wasn't going to be my day, and I was going to probably switch gears to do Cozumel or Arizona. So it's more just getting home and you know, re-strategizing.
Yeah, good deal.
The little spike at the end, that's when I thought Rennie was coming up on me. So I really gritted my teeth to get into transition before.
So let's look at just like the climb to Javi, because that's an interesting part. I mean, there's a lot of different interesting aspects in this Ironman event, but this is kind of one that determines, you know, a little bit about it. So it took Tim 26 minutes, almost 27 minutes, and his average power is 223. Normalized power, his average power is 217. So notice down here at the variability index, it's very close. Okay, so when you're on a steady climb, then you're not bursting. You're being very smooth and steady. So variability index is a key metric for triathlon, because that allows you to save energy for the run. The more bursty you are, the more energy you're going to use, and the less you're going to have for the run itself. So on a climb, that's pretty normal. Kilojoules, 350 kilojoules, or about 400 calories or so he burned just going up that climb. Training stress score 20 points, variability 1.03, speed 14.1, average cadence 71. And then this is the climb itself. So you can kind of see he's, you know, it's a little bit ups and downs there, just kind of how the climb goes. You know, at least you're solid and steady all the way through there. You know, just doing the best you can do at that point. So really good, really good. All right, so let's look at. Any questions for Tim? All right.
Yeah, I have a question. Obviously, at the start, going out at 320 odd watts for the first couple of hours, was that more just staying with the group, or were you thinking, you know, these are I'm going over your target watts, because presumably you knew you wouldn't average over 300?
Yeah, you know, I didn't really want to look at my watts, because I know that the first hour, or I was told the first hour is kind of just grit your teeth. And that's, you know, I wanted to be in the race, so, you know, for me, what I was doing to hold it out was, you know, I needed to do. But that's really, I mean, for my training, that's not, you know, 320 for that first hour or whatever it was. It's not. It's pretty good. I mean, it's normal. Where it's normal. It's just what it was taken out of me versus what it, I guess, should have been taken out of me.
And can you also convert that to what's per kilo for us, please?
Sure.
So it's like 4-ish,
yeah.
A little over 4. So yeah, I'm 73 kilos.
In the WKO software here, if you left click on one of the numbers, double click, up here you can change it to watts per kilo, and then just push OK. And then it'll automatically convert everything in here to watts per kilogram. So that way we can see for the entire Hawaii Ironman, his average was 3.2 watts per kilogram. So for his best, if we look at down here at his best 30 minutes, which was this first 30 minutes right here, we'll kind of pull that out for a sec. So there's his best 30 minutes. He did 4.4 watts per kilogram. So right here, 4.4. So for his best hour,
Hunter, on the 4.4 watts per kilogram, the good section that Timothy had, you know, if you stack up what that front group is doing, what are the numbers you expect to see throughout? Is it about that range for this race?
Yeah, and that's pretty close. Anything there around the 4 to 4.5 watts per kilogram is going to be in the right place. You're going to be able to hold it. We'll look at Luke's here in a minute and see what we got, but that's about the right place. Yeah. So he's right in there, all the way through to about there, and that really kind of shows where we're at. But notice one thing too. You also see as Tim, you know, kind of gets fatigued, his cadence drops. But also that's a factor of being more by yourself. You know, you're kind of back to your self-selected cadence. You're not trying to keep up with the guys and dealing with changing the speed as well. So that's probably what you want to do like that. All right, so let's look a little bit at Luke's rod.
Tim, do you mind changing spots with Luke? Thank you for that.
So for Luke was second on the bike yesterday. Awesome ride, dude. Really, really good. 4 hours and 21 minutes. His average normalized power was 271. So that's what his body felt like he was doing had he ridden steadily for the entire time. Average power is 257 watts. Kilojoules 4,038. So Luke did a little less kilojoules even though he did more watts because he weighs a little less. So he spends a little less energy. But still, I mean, that's...
He's out there for a little less, too.
And he was out there for a little less, too. Right. Didn't quite have to eat so much, but still, 4,400 calories. You know, that's a lot. How much, what do you remember eating on the bike? I mean, how much did you eat on the bike?
I have about a 400 calorie per hour plan. And that's just a mixture of gels and some of the chomps, you know, besides that, I just get what I can off the course with the Perform and whatever. It's got a little bit of calories in it. And besides that, just water. So that's all I was getting out there.
That's great.
That's not calories, but that's what I had.
So that's 400 calories an hour. So say 1,600, if we fudge it up a little bit, maybe 1,800 calories for 4 hours, and then whatever you got in the run too. So you can imagine, I mean, the caloric deficit he's going into the run already, but at the same time, as a pro athlete, he's got about 3,000 or so, a little more calories stored in his liver and in his muscles. So that way he's constantly using that glycogen all throughout the whole time. So that's how you can do it. Training stress score, 294 points. So a little bit lower than Tim's. Not too much, but just a little bit lower. His variability index is 1.05. So what that does is, again, that shows us that his normalized power and his average power were really close together. And that means that he did a really good job in smoothing out any bursts of power. So he was very careful to keep his cadence steady, keep his power steady, not dig really deep on any steep climbs or any hills, and just be very, very smooth in his power. And the reason that's important, again, is the fact that that saves muscle glycogen for the run. So really, really critical one.
Didn't feel like it.
Didn't feel like it.
Do you look at your watts when you're riding, or?
To tell you the truth, I was a bit like Tim. The first time I looked at my watts was when I got out to Kauai High. Actually, there's a little climb up to where we had the bike preem, where, you know, I felt the power on the pedals, and I thought, well, you know, I better just look where I'm at right now. And yeah, I think I was around still 280, 290 around that time. I can't remember exactly, but it's about where I wanted to be, and I was pretty happy with that, and I felt good. And so that's about the time where, you know, I had a bit of a look around. I thought, well, we're about to start the undulations towards Harvey, and I knew that some of those guys were probably going to make a move up there, so I just made sure I was up near the front, and yeah, just tried to limit the damage that was going on up there.
Yeah. So if we look at his file here, notice how instead of, in a contrast to Tim's, his power stayed steady the whole entire time. Only towards the end, where it looks like you're kind of conserving a little bit, did it drop at all. But very, very smooth and steady. This line right here is at 270 watts, so a little bit up here at 300, and going up Javi. And then did a great job on the downhill afterwards as well, putting out power on the downhill, which is very difficult to do because there's not enough resistance for you to pedal on because you have gravity helping you at that point. And then just nice and smooth and steady all the way in here. So at this point here, where if you notice the cadence gets very smooth and steady, is that kind of where maybe Chris went away finally towards the end,
Yeah,
I think?
I think also too, once you get to Scenic Point, there's a long drag uphill, and we had a tailwind, I guess, or a crosswind, but I was quite conscious of it actually. I just started to labour a little bit. I guess I was starting to tire a bit, and that I've naturally over my career been a bit more of a lower cadence rider, and it's just something I've been working on over the last 18 months is to just get that cadence up closer to 90 rather than closer to 80. Mm-hmm. And I guess I just fell back into my natural, what I usually sort of,
Right.
and so that's how that dropped off.
All right, gotcha. Luke, I'm sorry. Do you ride what crank length do you ride?
2.5.
Yeah. So I know a lot of guys seem to be going towards smaller crank length size.
Yeah. Well, it's really, it's very obvious, and so like when we kind of look at this, the overall cadence here, 86 RPM. So right where you're trying to head towards 90 for the average speed 25.5. And then when we look at the climb to Javi, he did it in 20 minutes, so 20 minutes to 8 seconds. Average power 301 watts, very steady. Again, normalized power very close to his average power. Kilojoules 356, training stress score 28. Variability index, again, very, very close to 1. So putting out very stable and steady power. 19 miles an hour, 86 RPM. So right back to that RPM, even on the climb.
For climbing.
Yeah, it's really good for climbing. And then you can see this is his power here the whole time. And you can really see how stable your cadence was really when we kind of look at between 84 and 90. So you're really right in there on the climb.
What's the grade on that?
The grade for this is 1.3% average. So it's obviously for these steeper sections here, it's more, probably 5 or 6% here.
Right.
So
And down the bottom's quite
and right here, in this section right here as well. So it's a little steeper there. So it's not.
But where it's at in the course, it just makes it difficult.
Yeah. Plus you've got it. We had a howling, almost direct headwind there too.
So let's look at his file inside the WKO, the Training Peak software, and it tells us again one thing that we'll kind of look at here is for his best 20 minutes. So Luke's, in contrast to Tim's best 20 minutes, Tim's all occurred here. Luke's best 20 minutes happened on the climb to Javi. All right, so very stable and steady power all the way through the climb, all the way through the ride. 298 watts. His best 30 minutes also was there, and then his best hour was the climb to Javi, and then that 30 minutes afterwards. So very, very, very good pacing. Really, really well paced, especially in here. Even though like you said, you're trying to make sure you're staying with the guys. You weren't going too hard. Make sure you're in the run there. That's really, really good. If we look at his watts per kilogram, again, we just double click on a yellow number here. Go up here to properties for power, change this to watts per kilogram. So this line right here is 4 watts per kilogram. So that shows us right here where 4 watts per kilogram is. So his best 20 minutes is 4.4, so just like Tim's. And his best 30 minutes, 4.2. His best hours, 4.0. So for the whole entire time, average power, 3.8 watts per kilogram for the whole entire average. So 508. One interesting thing here that we have a tool in the software to look at that I've had the advantage of looking at a lot of Luke's data for the past couple of months, and one thing that Luke is very, very good at is how he creates the watts, because it's not just creating the power, but it's how you create the watts. And so we have a tool in here called Quadrant Analysis, and what this is it shows us on the y-axis how hard you pedal, so pedaling very hard, and then how fast you pedal, so pedaling very fast over here. This is 90 RPM right here. So everything in this quadrant is pedaling very, very hard and less than 90 RPM. Okay? So for Luke, he only spent 18% of his day in quadrant 2. So that's a really key metric in terms of successful Ironman bike legs, is you really have to be below 20%. I really like to see even 15% or less, but right in that range, because again, that saves muscle glycogen, so you're not pushing a big gear with a lot of force. Over here, he spent 55% in quadrant 3, which is not pedaling hard and not pedaling too fast. Okay, so that's what we call endurance pace, saving energy, being light on the pedals, making sure that you're conscious of resting anytime you can. That's a real key in here. So anytime in quadrant 3 over 50% is a real key component. I've looked at probably 100 Ironman files now, and all of the ones who are very successful in the top 10 of the bike all spend 50% or more of their time in quadrant 3. Really critical there. And then 22% here in quadrant 4. So this is pedaling very fast, or over 90 RPM, but also pedaling relatively easy. So staying on top of the gear and just keeping a light cadence as well. So again, this should be the second most one here, and he said he is at 22%. So the best that I see is around 20% or so. So again, a really good example of where to how to create the wattage, not just do the watts. Want to look at yours, Tim?
Each dot represents.
Each dot represents a second itself. So it's one power point, so you can hover over it and we can kind of look at the one that's the most, had the highest force. So that happened at 16 minutes into the ride, 16 minutes, 54 seconds into the ride. He was going 14 miles an hour. His cadence was 69 RPM. He's going 660 pounds per inch on the crank. So that's a lot of force. So obviously probably out of the saddle, I bet, at that point.
Yeah, I think I passed Kalani.
Yeah. So 6 miles, 6.3 miles in the ride. So if we look at similar points in there, it's probably all around the same place. 6.3 miles in there. So that one hill made him do a lot of force there. So we contrast that with Tim. So let me look off all this here so we get a solid color. And we look at his quadrant analysis. So let me get one off. There we go. So in his, Tim did an excellent job as well. So 14% of the time in quadrant 2, 63% of the time in quadrant 3, so even a lot more time there, and then 19% of the time in quadrant 4. So I think that probably has a lot to do with if we kind of look at the first half here. So if we click on the eye, so this shows you the first half. Everything in red here is really the first half of how you create the power there. And that's versus when we look at the second half, and that's when you're kind of just, okay, I'm shutting it down, I'm just riding home. So when you ride home, you're really in endurance pace there. So, but still really, really well executed in terms of how you create the watts as well. Very, very well executed. That's one of the biggest things that I see with triathletes that don't do well in the run, is when we actually look at their quadrant analysis on the bike, they're all up here in quadrant 2. They're trying to push too big of a gear, too slowly, and they use too much muscle glycogen and they can't run really well.
And do you see a difference in male and female about quadrants and pushing the gears? 'Cause it seems like a lot of the women do ride at a lower cadence.
Yeah. I haven't seen enough women's files to say like, okay, more women push a bigger gear than men do. It just kind of depends a little bit on the women. I coached a pro 2 or 3 years ago, and that was one of her big faults. And once we finally got this tool, we figured out like that was her problem. She was spinning almost all the time at 75 RPM, and then she would fall apart on the run. And it was like, okay, we've got to start getting you to 85, 90 RPM to just have a lot less force in the pedals. And then she was able to really be steady and stable in the run. So that's a real critical one. Looks like kind of a little shotgun blast here, but you're kind of like, what does all this mean? But once you know where you're trying to be, again, quadrant 2, that's a no-no. Quadrant 3 and 4 for triathlons. Quadrant 1, this is really sprinting. So if you're a bike racer, you'd spend a lot of time in quadrant 1 in a criterium or something. But we don't do a lot of that. So.
Hunter, we've got only 2 or 3 minutes left. So, does anyone have any questions for Luke?
Or Tim or myself?
Kind of answered already, but your ideal cadence. My cadence usually when I'm riding, I'm pushing a gear that I can hold between 90 and 95. Is your ideal cadence? Do you guys shoot for around 90? What's your normal cadence?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I do look at on my Garmin quite a lot is in my bottom right hand corner is my cadence, and I tried to sit on 90 as much as I could yesterday. It's probably one of the most important. I mean obviously your power is important, but that's for me to be in that right gear is probably one of the most important things I've been looking at lately for sure.
I think that makes your transition to running a lot easier because 90 is solid running cadence. Yeah, so if you're pushing a huge gear and then trying to bring your RPM up on the run, sometimes it's a little harder to do.
So when you're using power on race day, like you said at the beginning of the race, you have to hold on to that front group because if you get dropped, then it's world champions. You don't have a chance. So you don't really look at power, but you just do a checkup every once in a while to make sure what you think you're at is actually what you're at, and then if you're not and you need to push more, kind of what's your mentality there? Do you think, oh well, I have to go too hard to keep up so my day is done, or do you kind of dial it back and just see what happens?
I was a little shocked. I was expecting to look at my power when I first did and see it over 300. Like I felt it was quite a hard start to the ride. Yeah, I mean, I guess once I realised that I hadn't been putting in the power that I thought I had been, that's sort of where I sort of made the decision to really try and hold on to that pace and force it a little bit up Harvey, because I mean it seemed like some guys were struggling and I felt quite good even though I thought I'd been riding at high power. So that's how I was able to really, over that next hour or so period, I really wanted to splinter that group and try and utilise those stronger guys that were on the front to get the gap.
So if you had looked and your power was high at that point, would you have kind of sat in a little bit and not tried to make the other guys suffer?
Anyway. I mean, my tactic was just to stay as close to the front of the group to limit the loss to any guys that were going to be dangerous. I mean, I was very happy to let Chris Lieto go off the front because that's usually his gig, but I really thought that anyone else that was willing to go off the front, I really wanted to try and mark them and utilise them to get a bit of a break. I watched the race from the car last year and saw how it panned out, and I was really hoping for a similar situation to occur this year, so I was just very vigilant and trying to make sure that I was in the right position to make that leap if there was that move.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like, and kind of talking, in the limited talk that we've had in the past couple of months too, I mean, having the power meter is kind of giving you that confidence to know that, like, wow, when you look down here, you know, I've done more than this in training, you know. So then you go out there and you realize, like, okay, I've done this in training, I've done more than this in training, I can definitely do this here today.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And I think from a psychological point too, like Luke was saying, he was expecting at that point to have done more work. So, you know, in your head, that's a huge boost. And where I looked down at going up on the climb, and I was feeling worse in training with lower watts. So, I mean, it was kind of like the other end of the psychological spectrum. So, it can be a, you know, I think a real positive or benefit, or positive or negative in terms of that aspect too, of how you use it.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you sharing with us the data and being open to do that, because that really gives us a lot of insight into, you know, how all of the athletes can better pace themselves, better do better Ironman for next year, and then especially, you know, to see you two who are at the top of the top, the elite, to see what you guys actually do. I mean, this is really exciting, especially for me. So thanks for sharing all this data with us. Really appreciate it. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.